What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the fifth album by Kanye West. Basically, this album is called My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and it came out in the fall of 2010. The thing about this particular album is just the fact that it's a pretty heralded project. There's a number of folks like Rolling Stone and other ones. Like there's a number of folks like Rolling Stone and Pitchfork and USA Today and some of those type folks that definitely gave this album like a 10 out of 10 and 5 stars and stuff like that. And AllMusic.com gave this album like a 4.5 out of 5. So it's definitely pretty heralded. So it's definitely a pretty heralded album as far as that kind of happens. I do think that Yeezus is a better album than this one, but I would have to say it's good enough. I would have to definitely say, but just the concept of it is it's kind of a short and brief kind of project, but there's a number of hits on here. I'd say that this is basically like Kanye West's version of like the Blueprint by Jay-Z, the first one. I'd have to say it's the same kind of snappy kind of concept that just has a lot of type vibes about it that just work pretty well. It's a pretty graceful album. It's definitely a ritzy and white collar and kind of like debonair type album. I'd have to say it definitely has a lot of pretty fashionable. This album definitely has like a pretty fashionable type sense. I'd have to say definite odes to that sort of style as far as that kind of goes. Just something you'd hear probably out in Europe and places like that, just more fashion prone type places, even places like New York and places like that, more fashionable type places, Chicago, some of these places that just have a little bit more ritzy consumer markets as far as the fashion kind of goes. As I'd say, it's pretty good crossover as far as that kind of happens. Definitely a step up from like the Graduation trilogy that Kanye West dropped with College Dropout and some of those type ones. I'd have to say, and it's also not in the same moody kind of pitch as 808s and Heartbreak. It's just interesting. Kanye West kind of being a little bit more fashionable and just more debonair as far as that kind of happens, just within the sense of trying to get that done. So I'd have to say, definite good blockade of stuff that kind of happened on this particular project. I would suppose is the concept of it is a lot of ritzy productions on here, a lot of good stuff as far as that kind of happens. The budget is just large on here. There's a good amount of guests, a lot of good songwriting stuff like that. Just overall has some great times. And I'd probably say, compared to some of the Kanye West albums, me just being more used to like the 2000s era Kanye and a little bit of the 2010s, this is kind of in the same pitch, I would have to say, as Watch the Throne, just a little bit more flashy. I kind of feel like Jay-Z I kind of feel like the album with Jay-Z was just kind of more money bound and just a little bit more eccentric as far as that kind of happened. But this one is just kind of that same sort of ritziness that Watch the Throne kind of had, just in a more kind of flashy and just more fashionable type sense. Just a lot more runway and catwalk type things as far as that kind of happens. Just a lot more showy type grace as far as that kind of goes. And I would look after it. It's also a little bit more stepped up than Cruel Summer, although Cruel Summer's a pretty good one. And it's not quite as nightlife oriented as like Yeezus is, but I would definitely say it's about on par with it. I'd say Yeezus and Dark Fantasy are both two ones that have that same amount of night flash about them. Just Yeezus is a little bit more pounding, a little bit more showy, and not quite as ritzy as far as that kind of happens, just with how that kind of goes. But it's just the same kind of concept. This is a quality album, another hit for Kanye as far as that kind of went. And the thing about this particular album is just the fact that around this time he had kind of got blacklisted from the market because of his stand up of what he did to Taylor Swift at the VMAs in 2009. It kind of banished him from the radio. For the longest time, I really didn't remember hearing Kanye West on the radio back in the day. I kind of like, they would play like Gold Digger and maybe occasionally Stronger and some of those type tunes, but for the most part, I'd have to say Kanye was just basically oriented to like the 2000s. Very infrequent to hear like songs like the singles off of 808s and Heartbreak. Can't really think of them right now. I think one of which was kind of like, maybe one of the singles was RoboCop. I can't really remember the singles off of 808s and Heartbreak, but the two singles that dropped that charted on the Billboard 100, just didn't hear them very frequent around these parts. Just would have to say, like, where I kind of am in Missouri was kind of more pro Taylor Swift as far as that kind of went. But I would have to say the concept of it was just the fact that Kanye kind of slighted like his radio appeal, and this is kind of an album that got him back on track, but it just kind of did it here and there as far as that kind of happened. Just kind of the concept of just being able to say that it was a very much return to form. But then Kanye always kind of does this. I mean, he always gets these kind of controversial type moments, then he has a good album around that time to kind of back it up. So even despite the fact that all the controversy that was going around with Kanye West around the time, there was still some quality. The same thing that happened with Yeezus in 2013. I haven't listened to The Life of Pablo from 2016, but I'm curious as to whether or not how good that album kind of was. And it's just kind of the concept of some of those times, just as far as what Kanye kind of did. But this is another good example of that. That just kind of happens to be the concept. This is another kind of revolutionary one. 808s and Heartbreak was revolutionary. Yeezus was revolutionary. Life of Pablo was somewhat revolutionary. So this is kind of another revolutionary type one. College Dropout was revolutionary. So there just were some ones that kind of had that sort of pitch as far as that kind of went. But there's definitely some quality here. So I'll go ahead and talk about the singles. There are four of them. So the first single is Power, and basically this is like an out and about kind of wild but strengthy night venue craze of a song. I'd have to say it's got some festive. It's a festive, energizing time, definitely, and it's just a vintage. The song is a festive kind of energizing time, and it's just a vintage Kanye hit. I'd have to say definitely like the sample on here. This is kind of like a revamp of Stronger. I'd have to say just not within like the vocoder and auto tune type stuff that like Daft Punk kind of does. It's just kind of like a more tribal version of Stronger as far as I kind of have. It's just a definite nice one. The song is a pretty good early 2010s hit from Kanye. Definitely one that doesn't get as much spins nowadays, but it is a pretty good highlight as far as I kind of have. It's definitely like this one. The second single is Runaway, and I don't really recommend this song. Didn't really like the beat at all in this particular one. Just had a really kind of poor piano beat that was just kind of grating and just not that melodic, or Runaway was just not that melodic or very compelling as far as that kind of went. So that's just kind of one I didn't really mess with that much. Pretty much one of the few blunders and pretty much one of the few Kanye singles that I don't overly vibe with as far as that kind of happens. So this is kind of concept, just kind of a dud in that sense. But Monster was the third single, and this is definitely a highlight, I'd have to say. This is probably one of the better songs on the album. This is kind of a pounding, kind of civil nightclub heavy hitter. I'd have to say it's kind of kempt and unkempt at once, I'd have to say. So it's kind of a little bit crazed, but a little bit civil at the same time as far as that kind of happens. And it's just, this is like a good, lively kind of outing jazz of a song, I'd have to say. Nicki Minaj and Jay-Z are on here also. And Jay-Z's on here a couple of times. He really has some suaveness. It's just kind of like an early taste of what it's just kind of an early taste of what Watch the Throne would wind up being like, but it's a good highlight. Monster is definitely a pretty highlighted Kanye song. I just would have to say this is probably one of his better songs. Monster is probably one of Kanye's better songs of the early 2010s as far as I kind of have. It's just an easy kind of highlight and overall hit that just works pretty damn well. Definitely that kind of ritzy kind of one, I'd have to say. Just kind of an easy bop. And then All of the Lights is the fourth single. This is basically like a bright, kind of showy outdoor festiveness of a song, I'd have to say. It's a sports game highlight, definitely. It's just got some high bravado and overall gusto kind of feel, I'd say. This is definitely kind of like a flexing kind of song and just like a more recreational type sense. Not quite a serious kind of flex, but just kind of a bravado type kickback. Just a good song to kind of have a victory lap to and something like that. Great song to hear at like a football, basketball game, something like that as far as that kind of goes. Just in like the flashing lights as far as that kind of goes. It's a good highlight. Definitely like the concept of that one. That's basically the singles off this particular album, I'd have to say. Some good stuff here. Really, this is like some flashy kind of showiness. From Kanye West as far as that kind of happens. It's definitely like the highlights on here. This is a pretty good album, I'd have to say. There's just some good stuff as far as that kind of happens. So we'll go ahead and talk about the songs I recommend. So there's 11 songs on this particular album. And out of those 11, I wound up recommending to you 8. So I'll go ahead and recommend those 8 songs. They would be Power, All of the Lights, Blame Game, Monster, Hell of a Life, Devil in a New Dress, Gorgeous, and So Appalled. So some of these, like a real good highlight on here is Devil in a New Dress. This also has Rick Ross on here. This is a very suave, kind of soulful sample bop, I'd have to say. It's an updated kind of vintage Kanye West, I'd have to say. Like his soulful type days from the past, but just a little bit updated version. That's definitely a good concept. Definite good concept for as far as that kind of happens. And it's just a great tune for some smokers. This is definitely a good highlight to kind of smoke up to, something like that. Just have some swishers, some blunts, some stuff like that as far as that kind of goes. Some joints, some bongs, some stuff like that as far as that kind of goes. It's a good highlight. Definitely like this one. This very ritzy kind of suaveness that just kind of happens with it. Good hotel music also, I'd have to say. Blame Game is a really extremely good highlight. Definitely like this song. This is a song I remember from back in the day. This is kind of a melancholy back and forth tune for the ladies as far as that kind of happens. Chris Rock does an excellent job at the end of this song, and it's just kind of, this song has a stellar hook from John Legend. And this is just some hit 808s and heartbreak kind of vibes. So if you like the 808s and heartbreak kind of Kanye West, this is a good song for that sort of pitch as far as that kind of happens from Kanye from 2008. So some good vibes to kind of get that just on that moody kind of more R&B type rap type pitch as far as going to have. It's good, real melancholy piano beat that just works pretty damn well. It's a very good song, I'd have to say. And then Hell of a Life is a nice one. This is kind of a jazzy, kind of electro night flash of a song, I'd have to say. It's a good stunt tune, definitely. It's just some ritzy, kind of suave pizzazz, I'd have to say, but it's got a riveting vibe about it. So this is kind of one that's kind of meant for stepping out, kind of similar to Monster, where this is kind of kempt and unkempt. This is another one that's kind of suave, but also kind of a little bit loose as far as that kind of happens. It's a good concept to kind of get cranked and have some good times and not quite be so kempt all the time as far as that kind of happens. It's a good concept to kind of kick back. Basically like some white collar unwind music, I'd have to say. It's another one. There's another one that's like that, and that's basically Gorgeous, to talk about that one. So Gorgeous is a real nice one. This is kind of like Gorgeous is like an out on the town kind of snazz. I'd have to say it's a good shopping tune, definitely a good song to buy some clothes and stuff like that. Just go and shop, kind of shop till you drop type stuff as far as that kind of goes. This is just a posh midday commerce tune, I'd have to say, and it's just some overall this is just some overall good white collar makeshift. So this is a pretty good one for that sort of sense. White collar makeshift as far as that kind of goes, not just blue collar makeshift, but white collar makeshift just in the sense of just unwinding, kicking back, just spending some money, some stuff like that as far as that kind of goes. Definitely a good amount of ritzy songs. This whole album is basically ritzy and showy as far as that kind of goes, like I was saying, so some good stuff there. And then a pretty grim one that was an interesting take for Kanye as far as that kind of went with So Paul. This is another good highlight with the posse cut. This one has Jay-Z, Swiss Beats, folks like that on there. Has Jay-Z, RZA, Pusha T on there, Swiss Beats, some of those type folks. This is basically like a grim and glaring kind of moodiness. So Paul has some grim and glaring kind of moodiness about it, just as far as that kind of happens. This song is graceful while doing that, I'd have to say, and it's just some lyrical snazz, and it's just a good suave outing fare, I'd have to say. So this is definite nice one. This is just kind of one where you're a little bit angry, a little bit moody as far as that kind of happens. Just kind of one for like a richer sense where it's not just kind of like a typical, this one's not just like a typical fuck you, fuck that as far as that kind of happens, but just a good vibe to kind of have overall as far as that kind of goes. Just a more ritzy and just kind of, this one's just kind of a little bit more ritzy and graceful type feel as far as just being a little bit grim and kind of glaring and just overall moody as far as that, just being a little bit more incensed and moody as far as that kind of happens. So it's a good concept about that. So that's basically the album as far as that kind of goes. There's 3 songs I don't recommend. To talk about those real quick. Didn't really like the composition of Dark Fantasy. Didn't really like the composition of Dark Fantasy or Lost in the World. Those were just 2 poor productions that just didn't add up to much as far as that kind of went. Those are like about the only 2 real blunders on here. Just didn't really like the composition and arrangements, how those beats kind of went and the stuff. Just the overall song arrangements as to how those kind of went, I'd have to say. But other than that, this album's pretty top notch, I'd have to say. There are 2 skits on here, so there's 13 songs on here, but like Who Will Survive in America is kind of like an interlude, and then there's like all the lights interlude as far as I can have. So there's really only 11 songs on here. So 8 out of 11 is basically the score as far as I can have. So me basically recommending 8 out of 11 songs on this particular album. I'm going to go ahead and give this album like an 8.75 out of 10. I feel like that's pretty top notch as far as that kind of goes. One of Kanye's best, I'd have to say, but it just kind of missed it by like a few hairs, I'd have to say. I'd say Yeezus is probably the better one as far as that kind of happens. Graduation may be a little bit better. I don't remember what I scored that one, but just to say it's up there with some of Kanye's best. It's definitely a revolutionary album. It had a lot of impact, a lot of graceful and overall showy type feels that just have some good fashionable sense. There's a lot of white collar type moments for just unwinding and stuff like that. A lot of good sociable kind of tunes on here. And that leads me to the social score. I'll go ahead and give the social score like a 9.25 out of 10 because I feel like there's a lot of graceful flashiness as far as that kind of happens. A lot of ritzy type tunes, shopping music, stepping out music, nightclub music, just a lot of showiness and drinks in the air type feels as far as I can have. So it's just some overall good social grace. So 9, I don't remember if I said 9.25 social, but yeah, 9.25 social. If I didn't say that, it's the score. What I would give it is 9.25 social as far as I can have. It's just a lot of good gracefulness as far as that kind of goes. So I just would have to say, in terms of the future, like Kanye is working on an album with Ty Dolla $ign, so we'll see how that one turns out. But this is definitely a pretty revolutionary album, definitely a hit album out of 2010. There are folks who have said that this is one of the best albums out of the 2010s in rap music or just music in general, and I'd have to say it's definitely a pretty excellent one as far as I kind of have some good stuff here. Definitely have to recommend it. I do feel like Yeezus is a little bit better, but this is definitely some excellent stuff here, and I do have to highly recommend it.